Hello everyone. Welcome to Board Exam Smart Series of English. This is Anjali from Orchids, the International School. Today we are going to discuss on the poem The Dust of Snow written by Robert Frost. As you all know, the poem is a reminder of how even the small things in our lives matter. Let's go into the explanation of the poem. Dust of Snow is a poem by Robert Frost that reflects on a transformative experience in a nature. It describes how a crow shakes snow from a hemlock tree, which falls on the speaker, giving them a change of mood and positively influencing the day. The poem captures the themes of nature's ability to uplift and alter one's perspective. So basically, the main characters in the poem are the crow, the hemlock tree, and the poet. The particles of the dust of snow, which falls on the poet on a bad day, it lifts or uplifts the mood of the poet and changes his whole perspective by the end of the day. The poem starts with the line, "The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree." In these lines, the poet is talking about a winter's day when all the treetops are covered with snowflakes. So you have to remember that the poem is taking place in the season of winter. The poet is in a bad mood and walking by a tree, a hemlock tree. And what is the speciality of hemlock tree? It is known as a poisonous tree. It has white flowers, which is poisonous in nature. And then a crow came and sat down on this tree suddenly. And because of this sudden motion, the mass of snowflakes from the top fell on the poet. So the tree is covered with a lot of snowflakes, and when the crow came and sat on the tree, there's a sudden movement, an unexpected movement has happened, and it has shaken the tree. And because of that, the snowflakes fell on the poet. This shower of dust of snow from the hemlock tree is evidently the subject matter of the poem. So this is where the title of the poem comes into significance. The title is Dust of Snow. And how does it connect with the poem? That comes here. The dust of snow is what that falls on the poet. So here in the first stanza, what you have to remember is what is the season in which the poem is taking place, which is the bird, it is the crow, which is the tree, the name of the tree, the hemlock tree, and finally what happens when the crow comes and sits on the tree. It comes and sits on the tree, the snowflakes fall on the poet, right? The poet is walking through the nature, he's taking a walk, and the sudden movement of the crow, it makes the dust of snow fall on him. Now, why do you think the poet has used the term dust of snow? You usually say it's snowflakes or flakes of snow. Here, to give that subtle impression, how fine and delicate the particles are. Because of that, the poet has used the dust of snow. You might have seen the dust particles. It's very fine and delicate in nature. Similarly, to give that subtle impact, the poet has given the title as Dust of Snow. Moving on to the second stanza of the poem. We already saw that the crow has sat on the tree and the snowflakes have fallen down on the poet. And it has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. For reasons unknown, the poet was in a bad mood. The word here, rude, referring to how he regrets that day. Many of the regrets have come into surface during that day. And he is not in a good mood, he is in a bad mood. But the shower of dust of snow lifted his mood instantly. He has wasted his day being in bad mood, but some part of his day was saved by the crow and the hemlock tree. Generally, a hemlock tree and a crow are used for negative references, but the poet used them beautifully to portray that inauspicious things can bring joy and happiness too. One must not take things for granted and should be open and accept whichever way the nature chooses us to bless. So, as told in the explanation, we usually signify or represent a hemlock tree or a crow as negative elements in nature. But here, what has the poet done? He has used these negative elements of nature and combined it with one of the positive element to make the whole mood of the poem positive. Though the beginning of the poem doesn't give you much on the tone of the poet, by the end of the poem you come to realize that the poet was in a bad mood, and this snowflakes or this dust of snow, it falls on the poet and it completely transforms his mood. As I told, 4 elements of nature have to be concentrated on this part: snow, the hemlock tree, crow, and the serene nature. Nature, why? Because the poet is taking the walk through the nature, and which is when he passes by a hemlock tree, the snow falls on it because of the crow. Now let's move on to the themes of the poem. The major themes of the poem include nature as a source of hope and renewal. Why? Because the poem illustrates how a simple moment in the nature. The poet is just walking past a hemlock tree. We all take a walk past trees or in the parks that we have. But how that even that simple or a subtle movement in the nature, a light dusting of snow, can lead to a shift in emotional state. I told you the poet was not in a good mood in the beginning of the poem, but because of that small dust of snow, his mood has completely changed. The theme highlights the power of nature to inspire hope and provide solace in times of distress. Now, the second part, the transience of emotions. The poem suggests that emotions like the falling snow can be fleeting. The speaker transitions from a somber mood to a more positive outlook, emphasizing the despair and can be temporary, and joy can be evidently found. Okay, so transience of emotion, the change in the emotions, which is the bad mood of the poet, which immediately transforms just because of the small element of snow. Coming to the next theme, interconnectedness of life. The interaction between the crow and the snow symbolizes the interconnectedness of all things. The crow shakes off the snow, demonstrating their actions and responses can affect our mood and surroundings. As I told you again, how nature is interconnected with the human emotion or human beings. When you have a bad day, what will you do? I personally take a walk around in the park, which immediately lifts my mood. Alright, so you have an open space, you have a serene environment, it immediately changes the mood. Similarly, here the job is done by a dust of snow. And the next one, importance of the small moment. The poet underscores how small, seemingly insignificant events can have a profound impact on the well-being of a person. Right. Here, the dust of snow. Who knew that even a dust of snow can change or uplift the mood of a person, or make the mood of a person, or make the day of the person better? So even the little things around you does matter. And lastly, contrast between darkness and light. The crow often associated with darker themes. I told you it's a negative element. And also the hemlock tree, again a negative element. It is juxtaposed, it is mixed or blended with the purity and brightness of the snow. Snow, white in color, we usually refer to something white as pure and blissful. So here the purity and brightness is interlocked or blended with the negative shade of the crow and the hemlock tree. The balance between these opposing elements illustrates the complexities of human emotions and the potential for light to emerge from darkness. Alright, even the mood of the poet is negative during the time, but because of this snow or this dust of snow, even that changes. How does the dust of snow come to the poet? It is because of the crow. Last theme of the poem, self-reflection and awareness. The poem encourages self-reflection and the speaker's experience prompts an awareness of his emotional state. This theme suggests that the moments of clarity can lead to personal growth and understanding. Again, the poet himself is admitting that that dust of snow, that particle of snow has uplifted his mood, right? So it brings a change in his perspective. That's why self-reflection. He has thought about that day, and that moment of the day has reduced the impact of the regrets he had on that day. Moving on to the main part, literary devices. First literary device is imagery, which is very evident. You have the image. What is imagery? A visual representation that comes in your head when you read the lines of the poem. Frost vividly describes snow and nature, allowing readers to visualize the winter scene. Phrases like dust of snow creates a sensory image that evokes feelings of tranquility and freshness. The dust of snow, the image of the hemlock tree, the crow sitting on the tree, the snow particles falling on the poet taking a walk, all these are some images that you will get while reading the poem. Another very dominant literary device used in the poem is symbolism. What is symbolism? Symbolism meaning an element is used to symbolize or represent something. Here you already know which are the symbols. As discussed earlier, both the snow and the crow serve as symbols. Snow about purity, bliss, while crow is that of a negative shade. Snow represents purity and renewal, while the crow embodies darkness and negativity. Their interaction symbolizes the transformation from despair to hope, how the bad mood is transformed into a good one. Some of the other elements of symbolism, as I already told you, snow and crow, purity and darkness. As I already told you, snow represents calmness and purity. Crow is a symbol of darkness and negativity. Then, what is the symbolization that you see? It is the shift in the mood. The poem's turning point, where the poet's speaker state changes from sadness to realization, symbolizes hope for something better. The small moment of beauty, snow falling, can drastically alter one's feeling, suggesting that even little things can inspire the change. Last one is the setting, the trees and the landscape. I told you the poet is taking a walk. The natural setting contrasts with the speaker's earlier mood. It suggests that nature can impact our emotions and serve as a reminder for the interconnectedness of life, how life is connected, how humans are connected, or human emotions especially is connected with that of the nature or the natural elements. Finally, coming to the last part of the poem, conclusion, Dust of the Snow offers profound insights into the transformative power of nature and the subtle shift in human emotion. Through the simple yet impactful imagery of a crow shaking snow from a tree branch, Frost conveys how small, everyday moments can lead to significant change in mood and perspective of a person. I hope you are clear with the lesson. We have discussed the literary devices and the themes related to the lesson along with the explanation. Now let's move on to the questions related to the lesson. I have included 3 long answer questions which can be a part of the question paper. The first one, how many symbols do you find in this poem? What is the purpose to use those symbols? Already in the part where we discussed symbolism, I told you mainly 4 symbols: the crow, the hemlock tree, dust of snow, and the nature. 4 symbols are there. Why does the poet use those symbols? Why do you think? because he wants to show a contrast in the nature, and he wants to show how even the little things like the dust of snow matters in uplifting the mood of a person. Transformation from despair to hope. That is what you have to include as the main points in this question. Second question. What does the poet want to convey through the poem Dust of Snow? Again, the inevitability of the role of nature in our life. Right. The transformation that we will have once we get out and be part of the nature. Last question. Our attitude towards a situation evokes both negative and positive response. This is a competitive based question. Analyze this with reference to the poem Dust of Snow to bring out the inherent valuable lessons. What all do you include in such an answer? First, you have to check for the key word in the question. Whenever you are writing a long answer, please don't just write the summary in the answer. What they expect from you is to divide your answer into paragraphs, highlighting the main points in the second paragraph. The first paragraph should give an introduction. Second paragraph will be the main body, giving the answers to the question. And the third paragraph will be a summing up or a conclusion that gives all summary of what all you have written in the first and second paragraph. Here, you have to check the keyword, analyze. It is not asking for the summary. You have to analyze. You have to analyze, meaning you have to go deep into the symbolic meanings of the poem and write the answer. Here, how the change in perspective of the poet comes is what you have to write as the main answer in this. Today, we are going to discuss on the poem Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. As you know from the title itself, you have two major elements to be discussed in the poem, which is fire and ice. We'll see how Robert Frost has magically intertwined the use of these elements and brought out a very powerful message through his poem. The poem goes like this. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. The poem expresses the profound idea that the world would end in either of two ways, either by ice or by fire. As I told you, from the title itself, we have the two major elements, fire and ice. The poet tries to convey the idea that the destruction of the world will take place either by an element of fire or by ice. Both the components are compared with self-destructing human emotion, hatred and desire. While fire is something very powerful and fierce in its nature, it symbolizes desire. And ice, cold and hatred that we have inside of us. The poem very artistically underpins the philosophy that we let our emotions rule us, and if don't control them, they will surely destroy everything around us. So how we are giving our power to the emotions, how emotions dominate human beings, how they control human beings. That is the major idea or philosophy conveyed through the poem. How we allow them to take control over us, and that will relate or that will end in the destruction of the world. Similarly, he thinks fire and ice both are just as competent in bringing the world to a catastrophic end. He does not favor anything. He does not say fire is more powerful or ice is more powerful in destruction. The catastrophe or the impact that both these elements can bring to human life is the same, or the destruction of the world is the same. Coming to the explanation. First stanza. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor in fire. So what does fire represent? In the first stanza, you have an explanation or an input into the idea of how fire will destroy our earth. The world would end in either of two ways, either by ice or fire. One group is of the opinion that someday the earth's core will get so heated up that it would lead to fire destroying the earth's surface. The theory related to destruction of earth, the end of the world. That's what the poet starts the poem with. Some of the people are of the opinion that it will end in fire. On the other hand, some others, the second group, says that if the temperature goes down to an extent that makes life on earth impossible, it would have the same catastrophic effect. Again, if the temperature rises, it will be ending by fire, while the temperature it goes down and the life on earth is not at all possible, then it will be ending in ice. So there are two groups who favor each of the element. The poet then compares fire and ice with the destructive features of human emotions, desire and hatred. He says that from what he is aware, from personal perspective, he is telling that fiery desires, he would favor the ones who say that it would be fire, because he is himself a victim of desire. So he is telling that I have gone under desires. So I have been under the control of desires. So I can say that desires are very powerful in nature. So I will go with those who favor in fire. By saying so, he brings about the idea that human beings let their emotions rule them, and the consequences of unmonitored longing is a chaos. He is telling that as long as you allow the emotions to take control over you, it is always ending up in some catastrophe. Moving on to the second stanza. But if it had to perish twice, here it referring to the world. First, he is telling that since he has known the powerful or the fierceness of fire or the desire, how it can end the world. Similarly, if the world had to end again, ending twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Meaning, he is telling that I know enough of it, even though hate is not what has consumed me so far. I have only undergone desire or fire. But if ice is also given a chance, then it is also equally destructive in nature. Then, by not waiving off the first option of fire, he considers if the world has to expire twice, perish twice, ice would be equally competent in ending it. He brings about a contrast between ice and hatred. The human capability of insensitivity and hatred has the potential for inner destruction. Though slow and steady, it has the same effect that desire has on us. So, if given an option between fire and ice would be just as good as fire to destroy the world. So, he is of the opinion, again, I am repeating the sentence that he is trying to convey. He is trying to convey that even though fire is what we all feel as the most destructive weapon, ice can also be equally destructive. Literary devices in the poem. Whenever you are going through a poem, you are analyzing a poem, make sure that you are aware of the predominant literary devices that is discussed in the poem. First one is the rhyme scheme. Why do poets employ a rhyme scheme? When you read the poem, you should get a rhythm that makes the poem more enjoyable in reading. That's why rhyme scheme is employed. So the rhyme scheme of the poem is AB, AA, BCB, CB. Assonance. Assonance is a literary device wherein the repetition of vowel sounds in the same lines happen. The repetition is at different places in different words. For example, the long sound of O in I hold with those who favor in fire. Here you have the repetition of O here, I hold with those, hold and those, the repetition of vowel sounds. Next one, alliteration is the repetition of a consonant sound at the start. Make sure that you remember it is the consonant sound. Assonance and alliteration, all these are sounds. Don't just look for the letters. The letters are pronounced in different ways. So make sure you remember it is the sound that has to be repeated. Closely placed words. Alliteration, beginning of the words, not any part of the line, it is the beginning of the word. The sound of F in favor, fire, were in world, will. Alright, consonant sounds. Imagery. Imagery is the visual representation that you get when you read the lines of the poem. Makes perceive things involving their five senses. Example, some say the world will end in fire. Some to say that for destruction, ice is also great. Destructive force. You have an impact. You have a visualization of how the world is going to end. Next literary device, again something that you might forget, is anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of the words, same words in the beginning of two consecutive lines. It is not in the same line, it is in the two consecutive lines. Repetition of word or expression at the start of two or more consecutive lines. Some say. You have the first two lines of the poem containing the literary device anaphora with the same phrase, some say. Next is personification. To give human qualities to the inanimate object. You are personifying, giving the human qualities. In the poem, fire and ice are capable of destruction. Thus, the poet personifies fire and ice by giving them mind and power to destroy everything. Enjambment. Enjambment is another considerably new device, which is when the line or the idea in a line is continued to the next few lines without a pause. A pause has to happen, then only the idea will end. Okay, if there is no pause, that literary device used in that area is called enjambment. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. Here, there is no pause when you read these two lines. Okay, here there is no pause, there is no comma, there is no full stop. So no punctuation marks are given here. So it is enjambment. The idea of what he has to convey is completed in the second line. So that is example of enjambment. Symbolism. A very important literary device in the poem. Very dominant enough. Fire and ice. What do they symbolize? As I already told you, fire symbolizes the desire, the innermost desires we all have, while ice is much of passive in nature, but equally of destruction. Passive in nature meaning the hatred that you hold. How does hatred come? You have the negative experiences inside you, and what happens after that? You keep them inside you, grudge builds up, and one day it will all come out as revenge, right? So it is slow in nature, but it has a very profound impact. Symbolism is a certain technique through the apparently poet uses another thing to represent one. Symbolism, symbolizing something, representing something. In this poem, fire and ice are symbolic. Fire is a symbol of desire, passion, etc. In fact, keen emotions can be said to be presented through fire, while ice is a symbol for hatred, cold, cruel, etc. Extreme loathsomeness have been presented through ice. Having the world end in fire or ice doesn't mean just burning or freezing. It is about passion, desire, and hatred and cruelty. How our world will end. Okay, maybe the poet is not just giving some literal meaning about the world just crashing down in fire or burning into ashes or being completely frozen. It is also talking about how human nature can build up or bring down the world. Use of nature, a very important point that you should check when reading the poem Fire and Ice. Similarly for the poem Dust and Snow, how poet has beautifully used nature, intertwined nature in the poem. Symbolism of fire and ice. As I already told you, fire symbolizes desire, while ice is hatred. Contrast between the elements. Okay, one is very hot while one is cold. How these opposing elements come into being. Concise imagery. Proper imagery he has given. When you read the lines, here the poem is very small. If you read the poem, you'll see very small in nature. But even with those small lines, he has conveyed a very powerful meaning. reflection of the human nature. Frost uses nature as a backdrop to reflect on human emotions and conflicts. How the elements of nature are used here. Okay, how fire is symbolizing some of the emotions while ice is symbolizing the rest of the emotions. Coming to the questions. Discuss how extreme behavior can hasten the end of the world with respect to fire and ice. How is extreme behavior? Fire is one extreme while ice is in the other extreme, like the poles, right? So fire, it symbolizes the desire. If you are overcome with a lot of desire, how will the world end? What according to you is your perspective regarding the same? Similarly, if you are holding lot of grudges inside, if you are someone who is building up things, okay, keeping things inside, and later you are trying to put it all the blame on something else, okay, how does that end in the destruction? That is what you have to write for this answer. The poem Fire and Ice carries with it very deep thematic ideas, themes of nature, how nature has been used, how human nature is connected with the elements of nature. Elaborate on these darkest traits of humanity. Nobody is perfect, people. So how we are all trying to overcome these emotions. Okay, as long as you have the control over these emotions, you will have a control over the life. Otherwise, it is not who is holding on to the life, right? The poet presents two reasons which will lead to the destruction of humanity. What values do you think do you garner from the two possible causes provided by him? Two reasons for destruction of humanity: desire and hatred, right? What values do you garner, do you get from these two possible causes provided by him? You have already been given a statement in the question. What you have to do is, with this question, okay, this part of the question, you have to provide evidence from the poem that could justify the statement. That's how you have to write this answer. How will the world end? Very straight question. According to the poem, how do you think the world will enter? Support your answer with scientific explanation. Again, this is general question, but when a general question is asked regarding a chapter, please connect it with the chapter. Now, again, please don't write a summary regarding the poem in here. What you have to do is, how will the world end? What do you think? Okay, you have different notions about the world will end. Connect it with the poet's notion of how the world is going to end and give some examples related to it. Lastly, you have another competency-based question. There are many ideas about how the world will end. This is the statement. Many ideas are prevailing. Do you think the world will end someday? This is the first question for you. It is your perspective. Please don't write anything general in there. It is perspective. So what do you say? I personally feel that the world would end in fire, or the world would end in ice. Okay, how do you think the world will end? That is how you have to answer in the first part of the question. In case you have given a fire or ice, have you ever thought what would happen if the sun gets so hot that it bursts or grows colder and colder? Here the question is regarding the literal meaning of the poem. If the earth's core bursts out, or else what if the temperature goes down? Do you think in which manner, or which is your side of getting the world to an end? Okay, in that manner you have to write, you have to frame your answers. Make sure that whenever you are answering, read the key words written here. It is not about the summary or analysis of the poem. It is about your perspective. Okay, so provide personal opinion, divide the long answers into 3 paragraphs and frame your answer. Thank you. Have a nice day.